Nostalgia really does blind us. With its rose glasses so tinted, sometimes I don't even know how I enjoyed the subject matter in the actual moment. This can be said for all forms of media, but if you grew up in the early 2000s and enjoyed scratching the rubber off your PS2 analog sticks, you probably consumed a fair amount of movie tie-in games. Movie tie-in games don't seem to be as prominent or expected these days compared to when I was growing up. Any kids or even adult movie usually had a game to accompany its marketing campaign. From Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to Fight Club, tie-in games aren't really around as much as they once were. I would assume this is because of expenses, time management, and in general having games like Fortnite where you can just add a bunch of skins and items related to the movie as the advertisement, and it'll probably get viewed by a larger audience. It's crazy to think once upon a time a whole-ass game was pitched to a small development team and expected to be usually done within a year before the movie's release. And this also kind of explains why a lot of them were kinda shit. Don't get me wrong, there are exceptions like Over the Hedge and Spider-Man 2, but none of that I would come back to more than once for a dose of nostalgia, with the exception of one. Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game of the movie. Yes, that's the actual title, and for the rest of the video, I'm just gonna call it the King Kong game. Before we dive into this, I do want to say that this hidden gem has been talked about in a handful of videos, but I'm going to try and steer clear of the points they make and give my own reasoning as to why you should play this game. King Kong was set out to be the biggest blockbuster of 2005. Casting an A-list crew and groundbreaking special effects, it was the most expensive film ever produced at its time of release, and as the budget climbed from the initial $150, then went to a groundbreaking $207 million. Of course, with this kind of rollout for a film, you would need a tie-in game, so Peter Jackson set off to hire Mikel Ancel, one of Ubisoft's most talented creators, who was responsible for Beyond Good and Evil, a game that really resonated with Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson gave Ubisoft unlimited access to the film studio and even went as far as to bringing Ubisoft on set for some of the film production. A great moment in the behind-the-scenes interview with Peter Jackson is that he wanted the game to feel like an extension of the film, like they can exist within the same universe. I really resonate with this as I find personally that the best movie tie-in games are the ones that don't stick one-to-one with the movie, instead making the movie's material work for the game rather than the other way around. As a quick example, in this game you actually start off making your way onto Skull Island, skipping the initial quarter of the movie. It just wouldn't work in a video game context. Also, working within a video game context allowed Peter Jackson to add cut content from the movie back into the game, like the Pteranodon attack where they're floating on rafts through the river, or even subtle line references that were taken out of the movie.
Aren't these things supposed to be extinct?
They are now.
I thought these things were supposed to be extinct.
Well, they are now.
There was a lot of passion and close collaboration made to complete this game, and you can really feel it in the gameplay. So you might be wondering, what makes the gameplay so good? Let's talk about that. To kick things off, I want to talk about the main two gameplay styles, playing as Kong and playing as Jack. For most of the game, you're going to be playing as Jack Driscoll, a scriptwriter turned
and dinosaur killer.
All of these sections are first person and really where the game shines the most. You really feel immersed in this game as soon as you play the first few levels. The level design purposely never has any flat surfaces and goes from wide open spaces to small corridors very quickly. This is kind of disorientating, but in a good way, and it doesn't feel like an island designed for the player, more so feeling like a real island that you get to explore. The immersion only gets enhanced by the fact that the full cast is here reprising their roles and really giving it their all. Throughout the Jack chapters, you will acquire sharp bones to throw spears, a handgun, shotgun, Tommy gun, and a sniper. You might be thinking, well, this is just a random arsenal they put together for an FPS action game. But when you really play this game, it's much more nuanced. For starters, you can only equip one weapon at a time, with the exception of spears and bones. Bones do less damage than spears, but are more accessible, and you can also break spears and light other characters' spears on fire. All of the guns except for the handgun usually have limited ammo, and you will usually run out depending on how good you are at the game. What do I mean by this, you ask? Well, the game actually has adaptive difficulty like Resident Evil 4. It will punish you depending on how quickly you are able to take down enemies and how good you are at staying alive. You can light a spear or bone on fire for more damage, and you can also use the fire to burn bushes to create a path. You can stab different grubs and insects, distract enemies, or lead them into a fire. And if you kill an enemy, the other dinosaur or insect at the time will start eating it, which can be used as another distraction. Okay, maybe nuance wasn't the right word, but you get what I mean. On top of this, Jack also doesn't move very fast and is always heavily breathing like he's been hitting the jewel since he was 5. This definitely adds to the realism and urgency in combat. All of this together kind of makes for like a sandbox experience within a very linear movie tie-in game, which is incredible. Oh, and I forgot to mention the most important part of the immersion. There's zero HUD. Yeah, that's right, you literally have no HUD, no reticle, no ammo count, nothing. Which was done purposely, according to Mikkel Ansel, to really fully envelop the player in feeling a sense of dread, being a human trapped on the most dangerous island. You do, however, have a dedicated button where you can press it and Jack will yell out how much ammo he roughly has. And if you wish to have the HUD on, you can actually change this in the settings. It kind of reminds me of another dinosaur FPS. The reason I bring all of this up first is because the Kong gameplay is the total opposite. Basically, big gorilla smash, pick up wife, wife helps get to next area, put down wife, protect wife. Basically, it's a stripped down wrestling game. And I love it. A lot of people think these sections ruin the game, which I fully disagree with. Yeah, they aren't as impressive as the survival horror gameplay of Jack, but they always come at the perfect time. As much as I love this game, you can see the time crunch seep into a lot of gameplay, and for 40 levels, the Jack chapters can get a bit repetitive once you've worked out all the mechanics. The game very smoothly transitions between Jack and Kong, intertwining a lot of their encounters together to switch between the two, and usually just before one style of gameplay is getting a little bit too tiresome. It's really fun going from being a small human barely surviving to smacking smaller enemies down with one hit. What's also really cool about the mechanics of Jack is that when you switch to Kong, you feel like you're getting revenge. For example, there are a handful of V-Rex levels that you play as Jack, and that are basically chase sequences involving you distracting the giant lizard long enough for another character to get the door open, or keeping them away from crashing your river cruise. You can't kill the V-Rex as Jack, and if you get caught in this guy's mouth, it's pretty much always a one-shot kill. In contrast, when you finally get to play as Kong, it's super satisfying to finally be able to beat these things. Bonking them on the head, slapping them around, and being able to perform the classic jawbreaker finisher. Controls are a bit tanky at times, and playing as Kong can feel a bit unresponsive, but I feel that it works to its advantage as it really feels like you're controlling a giant titan. As I mentioned earlier, Ubisoft had full access to the concept art and set designs, which really shows in the gameplay. As I also mentioned, this game does not follow the story to a T and takes liberties where it needs to, but still manages to work in a lot of pivotal moments from the movie. But where the movie and the game differ is definitely the atmosphere. The movie is almost a 3.5 hour long fantasy action movie, but the game doesn't feel like this whatsoever. In contrast, when you open the menu, you are greeted to a dark, still shot of the Venture drifting through the waves in the distance, with ominous music haunting you in the background. No flashy menu, no nothing, and even the menu sounds sound uninviting. And as you play through the game, you are greeted with terrifying enemies, sound design that makes you feel like you're always being followed, and level design that is both dark and gritty, yet beautiful at times. Something that really sells the atmosphere is just how goddamn impressive these graphics are for 2005. All the gameplay up until this point has been all from the 6th gen. Impressive, right? Well, what if I told you there's a 7th gen version? This game was actually released as a launch title for the Xbox 360, which had dynamic lighting, shading effects, upgraded resolution and textures, and 32-bit audio. But as a launch title with a time crunch and working with software that hadn't been released yet, you can see the 7th gen version suffering from this, as models lose their animated expressions, and sometimes the game will back down to a solid 15 frames if there's too much to render on screen. I play the 6th gen version on PC because I personally think it looks better, but for 2005, this game looks incredible either version you end up playing. Getting back to the atmosphere, I do want to talk about one of my favorite moments in this game. Throughout the campaign, you walk through levels that the development team really wanted you to soak in, and the game is great at directing your eye. The way certain levels are framed is just beautiful, even though this is a survival horror game. In my opinion, no chapter is better at showcasing this than To the Lair. Throughout the movie, the cast kind of discovers that Skull Island isn't all just dark and mysterious, it's also quite a beautiful place, and this is really reflected in this level. This chapter is just downright gorgeous, how the lighting spreads throughout the clouds, the design of the ancient ruins leading up to the lair, and the breathtaking skybox and backdrop. There's really no reason they had to make it look so good. But they did. It's a weird point in the game because you do fight off a lot of enemies as the intense music kicks in, but there is something somber and calming about this level, and towards the end of the game, it's a warm welcome. Usually I love to talk about a good soundtrack on this channel, but I've got to say this is one of the only games where the sound design almost outstages the music. On top of this game having no HUD, the NPCs with very impressive AI for the time are able to call out where enemies are approaching, just to give you another audio aid. Enemies sound terrifying, and the roars of the V-Rex and Kong are especially notable for just how much scale is conveyed through them. When you are making your way through the jungle, you will constantly hear rustling and screeches coming from the Terrapus Mordax? Another key thing that really helps is that Jack's personality is just entirely cut from the game, to a point where I can imagine this is how Gordon Freeman would sound like if he started talking.
Around 30 bullets on backup.
This was a smart move as it makes way for characters with more personality to shine, but it also really drives that horror immersion just a bit more as you feel like it's you in control, not so much the character you are playing as. I would even go as far as to say successful horror games like Penumbra and Amnesia: The Dark Descent may have taken inspiration from this game. As for the Kong sections, I don't think I've played a game that's captured the size and scale of kaiju quite like this one. When Kong lands from a swing from a vine, the audio almost distorts from how thunderous his landing is. When he's smashing through the terrain, you can really hear every detail of these ancient structures falling apart. Chance Thomas was the composer chosen to create the OST for this game, and he has a big background in fantasy games like Lord of the Rings Online and Dungeons & Dragons. I feel like Ubisoft could have easily taken parts from the movie's soundtrack, like the main melody and some of the other chase scene tracks, and just looped them, but instead they took the chance to entirely create a new soundtrack to fit the more dark and gritty tone of this game. I really do believe that both soundtracks have their own place. The movie has a more upbeat theatrical tone to keep up with the pace of the movie, whereas the game has a much more subtle, dark, mysterious tone, but still having heart-thumping, urgent music when needed for certain combat chases or sequences. As much as I'd love to praise this game forever, I do have to talk about the multiple elephants in the room. First of all, this game can be really hard to get running on modern hardware. Even just finding a copy can be difficult. If you're running on PC, I recommend trying to find a copy of the Signature Edition rather than the Gamer Edition, which is the 7th gen port. This version has dodgy load times, glitchy textures, and doesn't even have anti-aliasing support. But if you do want to experience the 7th gen version, I'd recommend getting it on Xbox 360. It's backwards compatible on the Xbox One, so it doesn't drop frames when you light a small fire. You can probably find a copy at your local CEX or market that has a video game stall. And other means of getting it? Well, that's on you. This game also is still a movie tie-in game that was stretched very thin. Just look at the list of consoles you can play it on. As engaging as the gameplay is, you can tell that the team didn't have enough time to fully flesh out what they were going for. And the last few levels where Kong is shipped to New York feel kind of rushed. Besides all of this, I still think the game is an experience worth checking out, especially in 2025, just to see how much heart went into such a niche project that was never really going to see that much success. You can pretty much guarantee you'd never get the same experience in any type of tie-in game these days. It's amazing to see this type of dynamic gameplay come out of 2005, going on to inspire horror survival games and push the boundary of what cinematic games are. The combat feels challenging, exhilarating, yet fair, And the way they managed to switch game genres seamlessly is also something that I really haven't seen since this game. Yeah, it's flawed, but in my opinion, a masterpiece shouldn't be perfect.